Hey, hello.
Hey there, it's Alicia. This is Blue Manufacturing.
And this is Justine, and we're happy to see you guys. It's been a little minute. Alicia, you want to catch me up on all the things and stuff that you've been up to?
Oof, yeah, it's been a bit wild. Uh, I was overseas. I was able to bring my intern overseas. We did a bunch of work, working 12-hour shifts, and then came back, and it's been eerily quiet. I still have lots going on, but having days to just kind of sit there and just catch up on emails and not do hardcore work is an adjustment being a new business owner. It's something that I think I'm going to struggle with for a while to get my head wrapped around. It's okay to just have a day where you can relax. Calm down, Alicia.
Yeah, I mean it's challenging when you go from go and you have multiple projects and you're like the lead person on so many of them to building your brand and building your business. And then your business just naturally is going to ebb and flow a bit. Well, do you want to talk about your consulting like a little bit? Because I'm not exactly certain on what you're doing.
Yeah. So I've kind of opened myself up to give companies my experience, whether that's programming things, designing control panels, designing a whole turnkey solution for a bunch of conveyors, or even just helping startups with we're going from benchtop to production scale. How do I select valves? How do I size my pipes? How do I figure out what the control narrative looks like? Those sorts of things. And it's been really exciting because I over the years I just become an expert at a lot of things. So being able to kind of help young engineers and mentor really aligns with what I like to do. Even though I'm not in a company with a team, I get to do it through my business. So that's been pretty exciting and fulfilling.
Yeah, that sounds amazing, especially because it's the work that you're good at doing, but you don't have to deal with the back end of if you disagree with a management style, you don't actually have to go have lunch with them later. You just have to say, okay, the bill will be in the mail. And it's like, okay. No, that's cool. I think that's really cool. And it's kind of given you some opportunity to offer internships and also expand your um, any work opportunities to other contexts that you've had in the past too, right?
Exactly. It's been one of those things where I have to coming out of my trauma that I went through with some of my previous employers that kind of broke down my confidence.
Mm.
It's allowed me to realize, wait, they're calling me out of the blue just from LinkedIn or whatever to help them. So for whatever reason, they heard I'm good or they trust me and they're hiring me to do work for them. That means I can give myself a pat on the back and say, Alicia, you still got it, and kind of pull myself out of that hole.
Yeah. No, that's super stellar, especially because even when you know that you're in the right, when you've been shouting so long into a void that's not receptive to your we'll call it feedback. It ends up kind of tearing down at what you think you're capable of doing, or you're like, am I right? Am I right? Because it feels like no one's agreeing with me. And honestly, I just think it was the crowds that you were hanging with, to be frank, because when we were working together, like there was a lot of trust and there was a lot of like, I understood the extent of what I was capable of. And I knew when it was something that I needed help from the controls team on. Right. And so, and then you also knew, okay, you got it stable this far. And now it's time to give it back to the process engineers because they're the ones who ultimately are going to have to teach people how to use it and like troubleshoot. So you can't spoon feed everything to everyone because then they're just not that useful. Yeah,
It's
so
true. And
I think it was just more of like the crowd that you ended up around that made it really challenging to because you're like, am I crazy? And it's like, no, I think that there's just misinformed people that aren't being helpful. So
yeah, and there's weird politics and things going on around it. But something that
yeah.
I'm very proud of is just saying when I know something and saying when I don't. And I just wish more people would be like that because I know a
Mm,
lot because I've been doing some of this for 20 years, but there's still a shit ton that I don't know. And every industry is different. And we're not going to get anywhere if people just like fake it till they make it in engineering.
Yeah, I mean, actually, that's a beautiful segue, which I'm certain you planned, into kind of the topic of our discussion today, which is, oh, you phrased it nicely. It's essentially like what they don't teach you in school, right? There's a difference between what we get from engineering education and the learnings that you glean through hard work, a hard-earned experience, just as I like to call it, like boots on the ground learning, right? So, yeah, there's a whole litany of uses and benefits of just straight up trying things and getting things, getting your hands dirty and just doing active thinking, active troubleshooting, actually getting your hands on the equipment and seeing how things respond, because there is a beauty and a grace to theory and to hardcore science. And then there's a breakdown when it touches scale up and when it touches, frankly, it's just like the messiness of having other human beings do it. You know, when I've worked in production and we have real humans doing a job or doing a task, there's a way that you think people are going to do it, and then there's the reality of how people are actually going to interact with the equipment and with the product, because humans don't like instructions super well. They like
Yes.
to do things their own way. They like to own it. They like to find simpler ways. I like to think of people as very lazy, and not in a bad way. This is in a very good way, because if you have to do a task over and over and over and over again, you are going to find a really efficient way of doing it. It just won't be the way that your quote unquote process engineer expected you to do it.
Yep. And you
And
only learn all
it's
that
great.
through experience.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
so I what made me think of this topic when you and I were trying to figure out what to talk about is I have an intern here. So hasn't graduated and he's had some internships, but sometimes he's asking me questions like, why does this work this way? Or how did you know that this valve was in the wrong spot, or whatever that looks like? And it's been a little bit challenging for me to go back and explain it in a way that he'll understand from recent education and tying it back to fluid dynamics or whatever that looks like, because I just know from experience. I have my instincts, I have what I've seen in the field, I know best practices, that sort of thing. So that was one aspect of it, but the second aspect was just working with clients that are at startups or other young engineers in startups, and how they get so much leeway to just go do stuff. They get a very ambiguous task and it's like, go have at it. But how do they know if they're doing the right thing, and who's checking their work? Who is mentoring them and making sure they're doing things safely? Like, sure, you can do something not very effective and you'll learn good lessons, but when you're dealing with chemical processing or heavy things or things that are toxic, there does have to be somebody to look out. And you and I have seen it. There's not just because somebody's a manager doesn't mean they should be, or they've been taught how to properly manage new engineers. So I just really wanted to dig into this with you because I know we both have so many experiences and things to talk about on this topic.
Yeah, for sure. It is a curious space, because I think both of us were just kind of raised, trial by fire kind of style,
Yeah.
which is a way of doing it. There are businesses that are well established that do what they call like green engineers, get paired with well-established engineers, especially if there's a style of engineering that people like to cultivate. But especially in the world of startups, that's like, you just can't afford to do that. You're just going to be given something of consequence. And if you don't know how to do it in a very efficient manner, you just end up you just work really hard and you find an efficient manner. So I actually talked about this with a previous boss of mine who was, I like to call him my mentor and not my manager, but because he was just a wealth of information, and he didn't ever really tell me what to do. He just told me what was important, and that helped guide my actions. which I think is a really healthy way of management.
Yes.
At least for me. But you sometimes in manufacturing, at least, or in like if you're in the production area, if something isn't going right and you're responsible for it, you have a very immediate feedback on if your correction is working, which
Yeah.
is not a forgiving way of learning, but it is a very efficient way of learning. Because if you are responsible for something and the thing that you did because you thought it would work isn't working, you are still responsible to get it working again. And it gives you really good feedback of like, okay, well, I tried turning this, like we call them knobs, right? But it's essentially, for instance, if you're welding something like one plastic to another plastic, you have to melt a plastic and stick it to another plastic and get them to meld. You have different knobs. You have the temperature of the welding element, you have the arrangement of the welding element and the contact that it's making, and the pressure applied and your time, right? So you have all these variables that are your knobs. And depending on how you crank the knob, you could get a scalding shower. Like if you're trying to shower in the morning and you turn it way too hot and now you're like pink lobster and you don't feel very good anymore. Or you can sit there in cold water all day because you just keep being afraid of the heat, right? So, but depending on if you're aggressive or really slow about things, you're still going to have the feedback of it's not working. And that's just something that you have to kind of learn by that heat and that pressure and that timing to get things to work. And then once things are stable, you have to understand why they're stable, right? When something's unstable, and then learning your knobs to get it stable again, because if it gets unstable in a similar way in the future, then you can be like, how did I fix this before?
Yeah.
Which is the benefit of documentation and also just the benefit of knowledge, straight up knowledge. You're just like, oh, I've seen this before. I know what's up.
I agree that we all have to learn that way. And those are really valuable ways to learn, is having the space to just kind of go out there and do it. But as you know, we're doing it on production systems, or, you might fault a whole system and shut it down, and then your exhaust system doesn't work, and then you have smoke in your building, or I don't know. There's just so many things that can happen. And sure, if you learn that lesson, you'll probably never do it again. But wouldn't it be better if we could create an environment where people have the right thought process to like think these things through and do the risk analysis? And I feel like that's just kind of what's missing sometimes in some of these fast-paced startups.
I agree with you completely, because there are instances of safety where fucking around and finding out is not actually the appropriate way of approaching a problem because there's a feedback of safety. Especially if you're working on like gas management systems or waste stream systems that need to not end up in the wrong spots. So that's a really good point. Now, I'm not really certain. Does that mean that you still just do the pairing method, right? You pair someone who's new and has the vigor and has the energy to learn things and try things and provide feedback with somebody who's experienced, who can maybe like guide several people at once. I don't really know how to do that if you don't have the luxury of multiple people on a problem.
Yeah, and I think it ends up going back to a culture piece and how you build your business, because I would agree that even in the early days of some of the startups, that no matter how many times we talked about wanting to do mentorship programs, we just didn't have the time.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of that, and it does. So the company might not set you up for success, or you might not be on a cross-functional team because every team member on this 50-person team is doing their own project. But I think it's going to take the curiosity and the push of the engineer and the adults in the room that have some experience and are seeing young engineers be tasked with some pretty heavy stuff to kind of step up. So I need the young engineers to be like, I need to ask for feedback. I need to sanity check and figure out what their what their gut's telling them. Because I think some people in a new startup might be like, this doesn't feel right. We're making a modification to this pressure vessel. I don't think that's right. What's ANSI gonna
Mm-hmm.
think? But then the bosses are like, do it. We got to do this. First principles, blah. And so I mean, it's just a combination of other things. And sometimes you might have to go outside of your organization and outside of your leadership chain and just seek somebody from outside and say, hey, I see that you have experience in this space building fuel cells. Can I run some things by you? I mean, I did a lot of that, and I try to mentor as many people as I can.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of value in very smart people admitting when they don't know what the hell they're doing.
Yes.
Because there is a level of hubris that it's really hard to overcome. I know personally, I have a hard time. I'm an out loud thinker, which is overwhelming to people who are very methodical thinkers and they don't need my word vomit in their brain. But for me, as I rattle things off, it is helpful because I have had other people be like, whoa, 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 that last thing you just said, it you would think that that's the case, but with this material, it doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm.
Like, like if you compress a gas, it gets colder, but not hydrogen. Hydrogen actually gets hotter, which is like crazy that it behaves that way, but that's how the molecules interact. And if you assume that it's getting cold and you're preparing all of your pressure vessels for cold, but really it needs to be able to dissipate heat, that's a big thing to know. And that just is like a knowledge thing of like, did they ever tell me that in school? No, it wasn't until I was handling hydrogen bottles and then putting like regulators on them that they say, hey, make sure like if you feel it heating up, that means that like there's pressure behind it. And you're like, oh, that's whack. That's like way different. So
and it's hard to teach anybody everything. We're chemical engineers. There's no way we understand every goddamn chemical on the periodic table. So some of it you have to learn eventually, but you do need that space where you're comfortable speaking up and asking and all of that. I just think there's a large group of people that are, and I fell into this early on where I don't want to speak up because I should I know this already? They're going to assume I know this and I don't know it. And then if I ask a question, I'm going to sound dumb. And so then people hold it in, and that's just not the right way to do it. And I think the leaders and the managers and the more experienced people just need to encourage that openness. And I try in front of large groups to admit when I'm wrong or, oh man, I don't know. I need to go figure that out even at 20 years into my career, because I want people to see that it's okay. And there's no way I know everything, not even close. I'm learning new stuff every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's why, you can look back in time after you finally understand certain things. And there's like, I think it's called expertise bias, where once you've learned something, you can't really remember the state of mind that you were in when you didn't know that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really easy to turn back around, hindsight has 2020 to like point back at a past you or to the education systems that have raised us and be like, why didn't you tell me anything? Or like, that's so stupid. But like, think about it. My career has been in the battery space. I worked at a company that was working on like recycling and making battery grade materials. And then I worked at a company that makes iron flow batteries. Right. Mm-hmm. And my passion is on material reuse and reduction in actually plastics and polymers. Mm-hmm. But because that has no money, I ended up in the battery space because I still want to do green technology. Yep. And there's so many things that I learned about battery technology, and then also about like pyrometallurgical methods, and then like plastic weldings and things like that, because I had to do them for my job. But then there are people who are working on like sonar technology or like, gas lithography and like other things I can't pronounce, right? And they're not like, the schools don't have the bandwidth to teach you literally everything about the vast majority of things that we end up being able to do as engineers, because it's just so wildly diverse. So they try and teach you theories and principles that then become applicable later. Like, honestly, outside of school, I've never done a triple integral. once because I don't fucking have to.
Sounds
But
like
I
something
have
they do in the
integrated
Olympics.
things. Yeah, like we'll just have engineering Olympics where they just do all the superfluous things. And you're like, calculate the enthalpy of the situation. You're like, shut up.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on with you, because we've talked about this before, theory versus real world, and how schools maybe are great at giving you, okay, this is that calc, and you might have a problem like this kind of thing. But once you get into the real world, a lot of that goes out the window because you're on edge cases and you don't have a perfect constant for what you're dealing with. The battery recycling space was all very new for all of us. I think there's, Korean, Japanese countries that have been doing it longer, but it was new in the US. So we were all kind of learning together. So there's such a huge difference between theory and real world that you can't really get there until you've had some actual experience.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely true. Though some of my favorite engineers to work with are folks who have worked in industry for some time, and they just have so many useful perspectives and tidbits. And they're worth like learning from and talking to. Like, for instance, there was a mechanical engineer who was doing design work at a startup that I was working at when we were still in the everything. Every cost matters. We need to do things really scrappy. Like, we want to make sure that we don't like overpay for all this, that, and the other. And we were trying to make a certain thing and make it repeatedly as just a tool for the rest of the process. And he was looking at stock sheet metal sizes because when you purchase sheet metal, it comes in stock sizes. And if you are to make something, like a fabricator can get more pieces out of the stock piece of metal by changing, like, for instance, like if the short axis of the base plate of something is 42 inches instead of being 51 inches, you can get stock metal instead of like a custom metal sheet size. You're going to save a ton of money on it. And it's something that I didn't even think about. Now, I'm not a design engineer, clearly. But that's like such a useful little tidbit. And that's something that some of the recent grads, and also even the people who came out of prestigious academia, I have a master's from fucking MIT or whatever, they weren't doing that. Like, they weren't thinking about what it costs, what it physically costs to make something, and how you can make it repeatable and consistent by just making simple changes. So it's things like that like you literally just don't know until you kind of work out there.
Mechanical engineers, talk to your fabricators and you will learn a ton.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, talk to your fabricators. Golly, do those, I mean, some of them, especially on the metalwork guys who are like, I don't need a respirator. They're a little kooky, but they're very, very clever, and they know what they're talking about.
And they know what it takes to get it done. And that example just made me think of how a lot of times when you come out of school, you have no idea what's feasible, and it makes sense on paper, but it doesn't make sense in the real world. And that's just part of the experience and learning. And I just would highly encourage people to talk to your end user, talk to the person it's going to next, get their feedback early and often, and like know that you can learn from somebody. Just because you have a degree and they don't, if it works out that way, doesn't mean shit.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of my top interview questions, is when I'm talking to somebody who's going to end up either working on the floor or interacting with people working on the floor. I like to have their understanding of, or rather, I like to learn how they chat with operators and technicians and the people who are actually physically touching the product, like actually doing the work. Because if there's a general lack of trust or lack of acknowledgement for the people who are doing the work, I don't care for that engineer. I need you to acknowledge that your sphere of influence is limited by you not taking into account that there's somebody who's going to interact with the thing that you made or designed or instructed on way more hours than you. 12 hours in a day, well, less hours because of breaks and life and whatever. But say a person does a thing that you ask them to do for 8 hours throughout a day, and you're going to sit there and you're going to pretend that you know this better than that person. You're insane.
It's
Like, you might
insulting.
know the theory, but like, you don't know the application.
Yep.
It's like, you need to take a minute and really consider the people who are actually doing the work. That's my
Exactly.
main thing.
No, and we had at one of my places, we had a engineer decide he needed a 8-foot pH probe in a tank that didn't have a manway and thought that was acceptable. And, I had to pull the guy aside and be like, they have to calibrate the pH probe daily. Are you going to go do it for him? I mean, come on.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense, because you're like, they can't fit. Or I love when like a probe is placed somewhere with like an access to it, but then the dip tube or whatever is too long, so you, like, as you're pulling it out, it hits a fucking wall or something. You're like, this was not thought through. Like, I need you to tilt this the other direction, or I need more headspace, or this is like designing things for humans to interact with them. Okay, so now it's a little challenging because humans aren't like stock sized, right? You can have in CAD that little human who stands there who's like 5'10" and, like 150 pounds, a little white male who, like, is not what everybody looks like. Like, the people that I work with on my floor can be like 5 foot nothing, or they can be 6'7".
Right.
And the difference in like a drawer opening where you have to load more raw materials into a station, it
Mhm.
can either be at like chin level or at like chest level for people. And if you're expecting people to lift like a magazine up to that spot, you're nuts, because you're way past the zone of ergonomic reason. Like, they're not near their hips, they're not in the safe area for their back. And then, you know what it turns into? My petite women have to wander across the floor and tap on the big boy and be like, hey, can you lift this magazine for me, because it's too fucking heavy. And
Yeah.
I have to sit there at design reviews and be like, who did you use to practice this with? Because if
Yeah.
you keep using like a basketball team to lift things, then clearly you're not designing for my people on the floor.
Exactly. Yeah,
It's like, you must be this tall to operate. It's like, absolutely no. Like,
yeah, it's insane. And obviously you can't do one size fits all in every scenario, but you need to at least have thought about it and thought about the ergonomics and all of that sort of
and
thing.
it's
So,
consistently missed, which is why
yeah.
I like being in design reviews. It's actually a really good call out to. It depends on who is in the reviews, and it depends on how costly a review is, because just adding more and more people, you don't get a lot of work done. But you should have a diversity of thought when scrutinizing something new. If it's a custom piece of equipment that you're going to use and that human beings are going to have to interact with, you should probably either bring somebody who's on the floor and works with people and knows the staff working with the equipment ultimately, or better yet, bring someone who you trust from the floor. Like, I don't even say a supervisor, because the supervisors aren't usually physically doing the work. It depends on where
Yeah.
you're working, but like a lead or somebody that you
Yeah.
trust
An SME on the floor. Yeah.
to instead of just saying, "Oh, we'll figure it out," because that's my least favorite answer. Some folks will just like be handed something and they're like, we'll figure it out, which they will, because they're clever, but it's not going to necessarily always be safe, and it's certainly not going to be repeatable. So
Yeah. No, and
diversify
I've
your
heard,
design reviews is all I'm saying.
yeah, I've spent a lot of time being a project engineer where I was in charge of all the capital projects at a certain company. And I would always try to bring in a diverse crowd, but I'd get so much pushback. Oh, you're going to
Mm,
bring in all these people and they're just going to create scope creep and they're just going to ask all
yeah.
these questions. And what I learned is that sure, you can't just go in with a free for all and say pick it apart, but
You don't
you
need
can
27
basically,
people in the room. Yeah.
yeah, you can basically provide here's the thought process, here's what we have, like, do you have any thoughts or questions, and have pointed questions like, are you gonna be able to access that, Sam, when on from a forklift, are we, or from a man lift,
Yeah.
you can guide the direction in a positive way and encourage good feedback that actually helps you to be a better engineer and design it better.
Yeah. And to be fair, also the earlier that some people are included in the conversation, the more they feel like they own it. Because I feel like a lot of times I had to end up translating what certain engineers were dropping on the floor into something usable, which is a lot of work for me, and also deal with the disgruntled people who are like, my hand is cramping because I've been doing this for 5 hours and the handle's too small, or I can't access this from one side, so I have to walk all the way around. And it means that I don't have eyes on this thing. So then if this faults, then I have to walk all the way back. Like it becomes, if people had the opportunity to voice it earlier, they also spend less of their time hating the engineers. Because I've had the opposite, where you have a lot of people who be like, these engineers think they're so smart, and they come in and they drop something and they never even work with it. It's like they never prototyped it. They never touched it. They weren't the ones to commission it. And I think it's just sloppy engineering to not have ownership of something. You can't. Yeah. So.
And they're not even wrong in some cases. So yeah, I think we have a ton more to talk about on this topic, including just more strategies to help young engineers come out of school and acclimate to the industrial world. And we will be back with you. It was great chatting with you, Justine.
Yes, likewise. Yeah, I'm on a roll, so I'll for sure look forward to talking to you again on this subject.
Sounds good. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.